If I could have your attention, we're going to begin our program now. I'd first like to apologize to Finn McColes. The reason that you couldn't hear us initially was because we didn't have the mic turned on. It was not their response. At this time, I'd like to introduce Pat Jackson. She is our Vice President for Government Relations, and she will be introducing the speaker today. Thank you.
Our speaker for today is a native of Chicago. Now, he insists that he is not the author of the often repeated saying that on Election Day in Chicago, everyone votes early and often. He does say that he is the bright college student who one day said, "To heck with this Illinois snow," and moved to California, where he received a Bachelor of Arts degree in philosophy from St. John's College in Camarillo, California. This was followed by an STB degree in theology from Gregorian University in Rome, Italy, and an MA degree in history from the University of Santa Clara. He has done additional work at Georgetown University, Claremont Graduate School, and San Jose State University in economics and international relations. This man is no stranger to school. He was elected to the City Council in Cupertino in 1980. He served as mayor from 1983 to 84 and has served on many committees. The one that I think he considers a highlight is the Sister City program, and he's worked long and hard in that capacity. He is presently in his 25th year of teaching in the Social Studies Department at Homestead High School and is the chair of the Social Studies Department there. Our speaker today embodies, it seems to me, that outstanding combination of teaching a subject and combining it with the practical application of the subject matter he is teaching. Students couldn't have a better role model. I think our speaker today would agree with Oliver Wendell Holmes that it is important for a man to be part of the action and the passion of his times at the risk of being judged not to have lived. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure and privilege to present to you our speaker for today, the Honorable John Plungy, Mayor of Cupertino.
After an introduction like that, I think I'll just sit down and that's it. Thank you very much, Pat. A cheer from my fellow council members on that comment. I would like to make one further introduction here. Someone I'm very proud of. I have my youngest son, Mark, in the audience here. Mark, why don't you stand up for a second there. And I'm happy to see in some ways he's following along in some public service. Mark is a junior at San Jose State, and he's attending classes there, but he's also been given an internship, and he is the public relations coordinator for the torch run for the Special Olympics. That's going to be beginning in the end of March and concluding at Lake Tahoe in April. And the torch is being run, I understand, by law enforcement people from throughout every country that is represented in the Special Olympics. So glad to see he's doing the job there. Also, in about a year and a half, he'll be looking for a job, people in the business community. Just like to mention that. I think I have to be very careful what I say because I once attended a conference and the speaker had made a habit of recording comments by politicians that perhaps they wish they had never said. Such things as time to grab the bull by the tail and look him in the eye. Or another one was, it's time to put principle aside and vote what's right. Or another one got carried away and said, I'm in favor of letting the status quo stay as it is. But my best one was a gentleman who was speaking out of a rural area, and he was very complimentary of the REA, the Rural Electrification Administration. And he said, if it wasn't for the REA, we farmers would still be watching TV by candlelight. So with that, I will try and be careful with my remarks. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today in what has been billed as the State of the City address. Someone, Yvette Del Prado, pointed out to me, somewhat significant. I get in one day before George Bush does his thing, so Cupertino is one step ahead of the rest of the country. Twice before I've addressed this chamber, the first time as I ran for office, and the second time, as was mentioned, when I served as mayor. And as I prepared for today's presentation, I reviewed what I had said on those two previous occasions. I found out I made quite a few references to paraphrasing John Donne, the poet, and saying, no man is an island, except I spoke about no city is an island unto itself alone. I also, at the time, I think we were in some tense situations with San Jose, and I spoke of no longer being a tugboat in the wake of a man of war, the city of San Jose, and we should stand on our own. Well, you'll not be hearing the same speech today. I'm happy to say that some of the previous topics that were covered, the problems have been solved, or at least we've taken great steps towards solving them. Unfortunately, some of them still remain. Overall, I would say that 1988 was a very good year for Cupertino. Keep in mind that as I review the accomplishments of the previous year, I'm not taking credit for myself. Rather, I'm talking about what has been done by a top-notch staff, and there's a center table out there where many of them are sitting, and I would like them at least to raise their hands, the staff from the department heads in the city of Cupertino. There they are. And of course, the top-notch staff does not function unless it gets direction from a wonderful city council, and three of my fellow council members are right here. And the third element is the business and the citizens within the community. Without the cooperation of those three, we could not accomplish what we did. And I feel as I've traveled in the state of California, I serve on various committees and national committees, and I meet with officials from other cities throughout the United States. Cupertino can stand proud and tall. We have an excellent city, we're proud of it, and all of you who participate in it should be very proud of it. I particularly want to thank John Gatto, who served the past year as mayor, and my fellow council members, because they did a lot to make this year very successful. One event which had great significance for the city, I think we should note. On December 20th, Bob Quinlan, who served the city for 17 and a half years as city manager, ended his 35 years of service to cities in the United States. The Cupertino we see today is a tribute to his vision, his hard work, and especially his caring for this city. I could go on and on about Bob and about what he did for this city, but we'll save that for January 28th, when many of us will gather to honor him. I want to say thank you, Bob. And I want to point out also, I've been told if you haven't sent in your reservations for the January 28th event, please do so, or see Barbara Koppel over here or one of the council members, and we'll take care of you for that event. Now, having Bob leave us led the council into what was the most important decision of the year, or perhaps of our council careers, and that was the hiring of a replacement. On January 30th, Mr. Don Brown will become the new city manager of Cupertino. Don, as you know, is here today, and some of you have had a chance to meet him. You'll be given a greater opportunity at a later date. The council and I feel that we have made an excellent selection to follow in the tradition of Phil Storm and Bob Quinlan. And I just learned something last night, a little bit of tradition. Turns out that Phil Storm, who was our first city manager, I was told last night, was the first city manager in California, that he was city manager of Redding. So we have a long tradition here, and we wish to welcome Don to those ranks. In the meantime, I especially want to commend Bert Viskovich, who has been the acting city manager and doing his usual fine job. Not only public works, but he's doing the job of acting city manager as well. Now let's take a look at some of the other happenings of 1988. 5 years ago, we were concerned about solid waste and the need for a disposal facility. In 1988, we signed a contract giving us a 30-year capacity, thereby alleviating some of the pressure that was building up. Also, we extended the franchise with Los Altos Garbage Company for an additional 10 years. And one of the provisions of this extension states that by late spring or summer, we shall begin free curbside recycling. This is a matter which should receive more of our attention, I think, than it has in the past, and develop it even further. Also in the past year, we completed the renovation of the Civic Center. Those of you who have visited the refurbished City Hall and the library will agree that we have now first-class facilities. In fact, the first major event planned for the plaza is the Cherry Blossom Festival, which will take place on April 8th. Speaking of facilities, in December, ground was broken for the new community center, which will become part of our Memorial Park complex. 5 years ago, I spoke of the need for such a facility, and I'm happy to say that by the end of 1989, our dreams should become reality. I hope that with its opening, we will be able to bring the Chamber's Citizen of the Year banquet back to the city where I feel it rightfully belongs. The opening of the center will also provide a new home for Cupertino Community Services and the Cupertino Historical Society, both groups serving very vital roles in the city. While speaking of parks and recreation, I should point out that also in 1988 we saw the completed renovation of Linda Vista Park. We also saw the dedication of Hoover Park and the approval of plans for the further development of Jollyman Park. This preserved land which had always been open recreational space and was threatened by development once the schools were closed. Keeping with our desire to preserve open space, we also purchased 3.3 acres of the Sims property adjacent to McClellan Ranch Park, again, in keeping with our general plan. While still on the topic of recreation, I might point out that we completed a major recreation survey. That was the good news, and our Park and Recreation Commission is studying ways to implement those findings. Unfortunately, Measure K did not pass to allow us to fulfill the desires of a majority of Cupertino residents. Where do we go from here? I'll address that just a little later on. Finally, in the area of community activities, I might point out the resurrection of a community parade. In 1987, it was a bicentennial parade, and in 1988, it became the Heritage Parade. For the future, it can only become bigger and better. It has brought together the various elements of our community which have made Cupertino great. For 1989, we will see even greater use of our Civic Plaza between City Hall and the library. I've mentioned the Cherry Blossom Festival. This Sunday at noon, there's going to be a ceremonial flag raising commemorating the beginning of Vietnamese Cultural Heritage Week, culminating in the Tet Festival at the fairgrounds the following weekend. One item, as Pat mentioned, that's near and dear to my heart is our Sister City program. In 1988, we saw an exchange of people and gifts. A replica of our Morion now stands in a place of honor in Toyokawa, Japan. And in turn, our memorial park has been beautified by 2 stone lanterns. In June, our students went to Japan, and in July, some of us also visited Toyokawa. In August, we hosted 72 visitors, and in October, students and teachers. The bonds between our 2 cities grow even stronger, and this has been accomplished through the cooperation of the citizens and the business community, and I wish to commend both for their participation. In Japan, they opened their hearts and homes to us, and we in turn did the same for them. And this spring, Mayor Tanaka, the new mayor of Toyokawa, will be with us for the Cherry Blossom Festival. Another group within our city has taken off and is building bonds with Pereslav Zalewski in Russia. Already exchanges have taken place, and in 1989, we will see the signing of the official agreements between the 2 cities. And again, business and citizens working together. As far as I'm concerned, if there's to be peace in this world, it begins with activities such as this. Responding to the concerns of many residents, the council passed a new residential ordinance, which puts a more stringent limit on the size of homes. This is one small move to keep density at a tolerable level and to preserve some open space and greenery among the residences. Finally, in 1988, through the hard work of Bob Quinlan, Bert Viskovich, and Blaine Snyder, we were able to negotiate a satisfactory compromise on trial court funding. We feel that a settlement was reached which will benefit all. And starting in 1991-1992 fiscal year, funds will begin coming to the city, which will be put into our general fund and will reach a level of about $1.3 million annually. And we feel this will be of benefit to us. Now, let's look to the future. Where should Cupertino be heading? Highway 85 still remains a problem. Due to changes in design standards, the city faces the loss of one of its off-ramps. This is a situation we cannot tolerate. If it turns out that no viable alternative exists, then we must turn to other choices. I myself cannot accept no access by itself with no other mitigation adjustments. While being concerned about our neighborhoods, we cannot be driven to a position which will negatively impact the city as a whole. Next Tuesday, the council faces a tough decision. And as Jefferson said, the whole art of government consists in the art of being honest. That's what we will have to do then. Be honest with ourselves and our values. And that makes it tough sometimes, but we must keep our integrity. It would be much easier to do otherwise. And in the words of the immortal J.R. Ewing of Dallas fame, when integrity goes, all else is easy. We must do something about moving people in and about our city. For years, I have spoken of a shuttle bus system to operate, at least at first, between Valco and the major employment sites. 1989 is the year we should do something about it. We must do something to take advantage of the thousands who, quote, live, end quote, in our city during the working day, and get them to shop more in Cupertino and participate more. 45% of our operating revenue comes from the sales tax. Fiscal year ending June 30th, 1988, it totaled $6,049,000. However, that was $244,000 below the previous year, and currently we are running 2% below last year. So we have to do something along those lines to bring about a turnaround. I'm going to propose to the council that a committee be established to research this idea of a shuttle bus and finally get something going on it. A second major issue facing us is the preservation of open space. The Recreation Survey indicated that our citizens want open space preserved, but the failure of Measure K indicated that quite a few people do not want to pay for it. While 53.6% is a majority, in my view, it is not a mandate. So I think we have to explore some new ways. I don't think enough has been done exploring private sector ownership and operation of recreation sites. You and I know that land costs in Cupertino are astronomical. The city does not have enough money in its parks fund to purchase all the desired properties. And I'm just talking about land that's in our general plan. We're not talking about going out and trying to acquire something that in some ways doesn't exist, hasn't been thought of. We're talking about the things in our general plan. And so for this reason, to try and acquire a few more funds, the council voted Tuesday night to apply the parks fee to single vacant lot development, just as the fee has been applied to subdivisions up to the present time. Also, I would hope that as we negotiate with other government entities for the purchase of their surplus land, they would remember that taxpayers have already paid once for this land and should not be required to pay the highly inflated prices of today's market. When you come right down to it, many times the city is the last resort for the preservation of the quality of life. And I think one area that has to be explored, and this could be a win-win situation for example, the city and the school districts. And that is, we've had the passage of Proposition 98. The allocation of that money hasn't been fully determined. Why not take a look that when a closed school site is put up for sale, instead of the city being required to pay the market value, that they pay a much lower value, but then the school be compensated from the Proposition 98 funds. I think there is some possibility along these lines. Water conservation is another issue that faces us. We simply must do more to preserve this precious resource and some others. And despite some rainfall and snowpack up in the Sierra, we are facing the possibility of rationing this next year. Our entire environment must also be considered. We must do our part to protect the ozone layer, the air quality of our community. One small step might be the banning of the styrofoam containers. And some communities have already done this, and I think we should at least take a hard look at this through our Energy Committee. Another more positive approach, and this is one I would like to see moved along, would be the encouragement and support of the planting of more trees in the city. Why not replace all those curbside trees that have been removed over the years by owners and never been replaced? What a tremendous project for neighborhood groups, clubs, others in cooperation with the city, that we make this a city of trees. One of the things we saw when we were in Toyokawa, the former mayor, Mayor Yamamoto, he was responsible almost personally for planting over 1,000 cherry trees. Not only would it beautify the city, and I'm not saying cherry trees, but trees that won't rip up the sidewalks, we know the various types, trees that are drought resistant and the like, but also would help protect some of our community, the ozone, and the environment. For more than 33 years now, Cupertino has experienced its growing stage, but now it's reached its level of maturity. We are near build-out as far as large acreage is concerned. About the only large space left is the Kaiserland and the Catholic Church property off Foothill. We must exercise the greatest of care in these remaining areas. But just as a person in his or her 30s begins to think more and more of really settling into a career and the family, so too we as a city must think more and more of our family, the people who live within our borders. Tremendous social change is taking place which affects all cities, and Cupertino is no exception. The social needs are growing. Homelessness, AIDS, drug abuse. These are not just rising statistics at a national or state level, they are our problems. And much of the support that has been there in the past from the federal and the state level is either declining or it's gone. And we are being placed with the responsibility of dealing with these problems. As members of the Cupertino community, we must be more concerned about these major problems. I'm calling upon businesses, schools, and the city to develop even further programs which will more vigorously address the problem of drug abuse. If businesses want good, dedicated workers for the future, then they better help to make sure they do not get workers whose brains have been fried by substance abuse. We have to do something about it. Child care is another issue which must be addressed. I know in the committees I serve on at the national level, we started by talking about teenagers. We're down to the preschool because we must make the impact there. 75 to 80% of the women in Santa Clara County work outside the home. The traditional family as we knew it really doesn't exist to any great degree. So child care becomes very important. And I want to commend Apple and Westfield for establishing centers for their employees, but much more must be done. Again, I propose that businesses, the schools, who are doing quite a bit already with some child care facilities, and the city come together to seek some meaningful solutions. Finally, Cupertino is changing demographically. We are an aging population, and we must begin to address even more the needs of those citizens who have contributed so much to our community. And we must do this through the continuation and expansion of supportive programs such as the senior daycare, senior housing, Project Match. Through these, we can ensure the retention of the people in our cities. Also, our city over the last few years has become a myriad of colors and cultures. And we are no longer, what was told to me when I first came into this area in 1963, a tight little all-white island of affluence. We are changing. We are receiving immigrants. And instead of rejecting the new immigrants, we should welcome them as another phase of the migration that began with the visit of the Spanish in the 1700s. Look at what has been brought to us by the immigrants: the Spanish, the farmers from the East, the Irish, the Yugoslavs, the Italians, the Germans, the Portuguese, the Japanese, the World War II GIs nearly released from the service, the brain drain from other parts of the country and other parts of the world that have migrated to our area. They have enriched our lives and our valley, and so too will these new immigrants. We have to reach out somehow and weave them into our society. Just as the weaver creates the tapestry, so too we can create a tapestry of people here in Cupertino. I'll be asking the council to endorse the concept of unity and strength through diversity of people, and to incorporate that into either our 4th of July celebration, our Heritage Parade, to make people more aware of this heritage, a display of arts. And I think this is a subject I'm just touching upon briefly, the whole subject of arts and arts in the city. We have now a Fine Arts Commission. You're going to see some of the results of their efforts. I think more can even be done along these lines. But we should not stop there. As John Gardner once said, societies that keep their values alive do so not by escaping the process of decay, but by powerful processes of regeneration. There must be perpetual rebuilding. Each generation must rediscover the living elements in its own tradition and adapt them to present realities. To assist in that rediscovery is one of the tasks of leadership. For 26 years, I have lived and worked in what is now Cupertino. I am proud of our city, and I will continue to work on behalf of all its citizens. As Thomas Jefferson once said, when a man assumes a public trust, he should consider himself a public property. Continuing the practice I started in 1984 when I served as mayor, I will be holding a series of luncheon meetings with members of key groups in the community. In addition, I want to reach out to our other citizens, those whom I mentioned before who spend their working days in our city. I will make myself available to meet with them during their lunch hour, sort of a brown bag lunch at their site, an open forum where a free exchange can take place so that they feel they are part of the city, which indeed they are. Some people know me also for occasionally walking around the city, and to the citizens I say, if you see me walking out there, encourage me, but also come out and say hello and come on and join with me. If you have questions, come out and ask. So in closing, I say thanks to all who have made Cupertino the great city it is. And as we now move forward in 1989, I leave you with the oath the citizen of ancient Athens recited, not just their leaders, but all citizens. We will never bring disgrace to our city by an act of dishonesty or cowardice, nor ever desert our suffering comrades in the ranks. We will fight for the ideals and sacred thing of the city, both alone and with many. We will revere and obey the city's laws and do our best to incite a like respect and reverence in those about us. And thus, in all these ways, we will strive to transmit this city not less, but greater, better, and more beautiful than it was transmitted to us. Thank you very much.